A broken foot, salvaged tyre rubber, and a £2 work boot that should have disappeared into history. Instead, it survived skinheads, punk rock, bankruptcy, and a betrayal that nearly destroyed everything it stood for. This is the story of how one of the most rebellious brands on earth almost died, and then came back worth billions. From battlefield to business. Our story begins in the ruins of post-war Munich, 1945. Dr. Klaus Martens, a 25-year-old German military doctor, has just returned from World War II nursing a broken foot. He'd injured his ankle while skiing in the Bavarian Alps, and now he faced a painful problem. His standard-issue army boots were absolute torture on his injured foot. Every step was agony. But Martens was a problem solver. As he hobbled through war-torn Munich, scavenging what he could from the rubble, an idea took shape. What if boots didn't have to hurt? What if they could actually help you heal? Using salvaged tyre rubber and soft leather purchased from a bombed-out cobbler's shop, Martens constructed something revolutionary, a boot with an air-cushioned sole. Instead of the traditional hard leather that had been standard for centuries, his design used pockets of air to provide cushioning and support. It was comfortable, it was practical, it worked. Martens showed his prototype to an old university friend, Dr. Herbert Funk, a mechanical engineer. Funk immediately saw the potential. In 1947, the two doctors went into business together, using discarded military supplies to manufacture their comfortable boots. Their target market wasn't soldiers or workers, it was primarily older women and housewives who spent long hours on their feet. And it worked. Within just 5 years, by 1952, their business was booming enough to open a factory in Munich. Their air-cushioned sole was genuinely innovative, and demand kept growing. By 1959, Martens and Funk were ready to expand beyond Europe. They began advertising their unique footwear in trade magazines across Europe. Across the English Channel, in the small town of Wollaston, Northamptonshire, the Griggs family had been making boots since 1901. For nearly 68 decades, R. Griggs Group had earned a solid reputation for sturdy, durable work boots in the heart of England's traditional shoe industry. In 1959, Bill Griggs, the third generation running the family business, was flipping through a shoe trade magazine when an advertisement caught his eye. An air-cushioned sole. Interesting. Griggs reached out and acquired the license to manufacture the boots in the United Kingdom. But he didn't just copy Martens' design, he transformed it. Griggs altered the heel shape for a better fit, added a distinctive bulbous but simple upper, and introduced what would become the boot's most iconic feature, contrasting yellow welt stitching. He created a two-tone grooved sole edge, developed a unique tread pattern, and branded the sole as Airwear, with the slogan, "With bouncing soles." On April 1st, 1960, the boot was born. They named it the 1460. 1460, the exact date of its launch. The 8-eyelet cherry red boot that rolled off the production line at the Cobbs Lane factory in Wollaston would become the most iconic shoe in British history, though nobody knew it yet.
The 1460 started life humbly. At just £2, it was marketed as a practical work boot, and that's exactly how it was used. Postmen wore them, factory workers wore them, police officers wore them. Dr. Martens were functional, durable, and affordable. Nothing more, nothing less. Just honest boots for honest work. But then something unexpected happened, something incredible. By the late 1960s, a new youth movement was emerging in Britain. Early skinheads, multicultural, scar-loving young people who proudly championed British working-class style began picking up Dr. Martens. The boots perfectly embodied everything they stood for: tough, unpretentious, and defiantly working class. The simple 8-hole 1460 became part of the uniform, paired with Levi's jeans and button-down shirts. Then came the moment that changed everything. Pete Townshend, guitarist for The Who, became the first high-profile celebrity to wear Dr. Martens on stage. When asked why, Townshend said he was sick of dressing up as a Christmas tree in flowing robes that got in the way of guitar playing, so he moved to utility wear. But it was more than practicality. It was a statement, a symbol of working-class pride and rebellious attitude. Townsend's endorsement transformed the boot from workwear into cultural symbol. Almost overnight, Dr. Martens went from factory floors to concert stages, from anonymous utility to fierce self-expression. The 1970s and 80s saw British youth culture explode into countless distinct tribes: glam rockers, punks, two-tone fans, goths, new romantics. Each new subculture adopted the boot and made it their own. Each tribe subverted the style of the previous wearers, yet large sections of the anti-establishment underground continually championed Dr. Martens. By the end of the 1970s, the boot had become a symbol of rebellion at the very heart of British youth culture. The boots even crossed the Atlantic. American hardcore punk musicians touring the UK started buying pairs and bringing them back to the West Coast, inadvertently introducing Dr. Martens to American subculture. Meanwhile, back in Britain, sales of small men's sizes alerted the company to a new trend. Young women were buying the boots and customizing them, often adding floral patterns to the simple black leather. Then came the 1990s and the grunge explosion. Kurt Cobain wore them. Pearl Jam wore them. The heavily worn, scuffed Dr. Martens boot fit perfectly with grunge's loser kid aesthetic. Global sales exploded. By the mid-1990s, Dr. Martens was at its absolute peak. The company opened a 6-story department store in London's Covent Garden that sold not just boots, but food, belts, and watches. The factory could produce up to 10 million pairs per year. The company employed 2,700 people and expected annual revenues of £170 million. Even Pope John Paul II wore custom white Dr. Martens. The £2 work boot had become a global empire. But empires, as history shows, can fall.
Near-death experience. The early 2000s brought disaster. Sales, which had seemed unstoppable just years earlier, began to plummet. The company had expanded into dozens of different styles, diluting the brand's identity. Fashion was changing. The boots that had been everywhere suddenly felt dated. The numbers were devastating. Revenue collapsed from $412 million in 1999 to just $127 million by 2006. In 2003 alone, the company lost approximately £20 million. Dr. Martens, the indestructible boot that had survived skinheads, punks and grunge, was facing something it couldn't bounce back from: bankruptcy. The Griggs family faced an impossible choice. They could maintain production in Britain, stay true to their heritage and watch the company die, or they could do the unthinkable. On April 1st, 2003, exactly 43 years to the day after the 1460 boot first launched, the announcement came. Dr. Martens would cease all production in the United Kingdom. 5 factories would close, 2 shops would shut, more than 1,000 employees would lose their jobs. Production would move to China and Thailand, where boots could be made cheaper. Only 20 employees would remain in the UK, all in the head office. The irony was brutal. Dr. Martens, the boot that symbolised British working-class pride, had just abandoned British workers to survive. Sales had dropped from 10 million pairs annually in the 1990s to just 5 million in 2003. The brand that had once employed thousands across the English Midlands now had empty factories in Northamptonshire, Leicestershire and Somerset. Communities that had built Dr. Martens for decades were devastated. The cultural backlash was immediate. How could a boot that represented authenticity, rebellion and working-class values betray those very principles? Competitors like Salvaged, who had manufactured Dr. Martens under licence and continued making boots in England, gained popularity among purists who refused to accept the Chinese-made versions. The critics had a point. The new boots from Asia used thinner leather and softer construction. They didn't require the painful break-in period that had been a rite of passage for generations of wearers. The quality, many argued, simply wasn't the same. Dr. Martens had survived skinheads, neo-Nazis, punk rock and grunge, but could it survive globalisation? Could it survive abandoning its soul? For a moment, it genuinely seemed like the answer might be no. The brand that had kicked against the norm for 43 years appeared ready to die.
Phoenix Rising. But this story doesn't end in 2003. In fact, the most remarkable chapter was just beginning. In 2004, just 1 year after closing its British factories, Dr. Martens made a symbolic move. They launched the Vintage line and reopened the Cobbs Lane factory in Wollaston, the very place where the first 1460 had been made in 1960. This factory would produce boots to the original specifications, using the old-school methods made in England. Production was tiny, just 50 pairs per day, representing only 1% of the company's total output, but it mattered. The heritage wasn't completely dead. The restructuring was so successful that the R. Griggs Group won an award from the Institute for Turnaround for conducting such an effective corporate reform. Dr. Martens had survived. By 2012, something unexpected was happening. Sales were setting new records. A new generation, hipsters, fashion influencers, teenagers who hadn't even been born when grunge died, were discovering Dr. Martens. The boots were cool again. Or perhaps they'd never stopped being cool. In 2014, private equity firm Permira saw the potential and bought Dr. Martens for €380 million. They invested heavily in e-commerce and direct-to-consumer channels, modernizing the brand while respecting its heritage. Then came 2020 and the global pandemic. While countless fashion brands collapsed, Dr. Martens thrived. Revenue in the 6 months ending September 2020 was up 18% to £318 million. The company was selling 11 million pairs of boots annually in more than 60 countries, and remarkably, more than half of all revenue still came from that original design, the 1460 boot, unchanged since April 1, 1960. In January 2021, Dr. Martens announced its intention to list on the London Stock Exchange. The response was extraordinary. The IPO was oversubscribed 8 times. When the boots finally hit the market on January 29th, they were priced at 370 pence per share, the top end of the range, giving the company a valuation of £3.7 billion.
That's 10 times what Permira had paid just 7 years earlier. The offering raised £1.3 billion. On the first day of trading, shares jumped 22% to 450 pence. The company began trading under the perfect ticker symbol, DOCS. Dr. Martens was now listed on the FTSE 250 index, one of Britain's most significant public companies. From a £2 work boot in 1960 to a £3.7 billion global empire in 2021. From the brink of bankruptcy to the London Stock Exchange in less than 2 decades. Today, Dr. Martens sits at an interesting crossroads. The boots are made across multiple countries, the UK, China, Vietnam, Laos, and Thailand, yet the brand has never been stronger. Each generation continues to discover and reinterpret the 1460, making it their own. From postmen to punk rockers, from Kurt Cobain to Gen Z influencers, the boot remains a blank canvas for self-expression. The rise of Dr. Martens isn't just a business story. It's a story about resilience, identity, and the strange alchemy that turns a functional object into a cultural icon. It's about a boot that has somehow managed to represent rebellion while being worn by everyone, that symbolizes British manufacturing while being made globally, that nearly died but came back stronger than ever. 65 years after that first 1460 rolled off the production line in Wollaston, the bouncing soul keeps bouncing, and the rise continues.